Welcome back to More Than Gardening. I'm so happy you clicked on this video because you're about to see how really easy it is to just make a simple loaf of sandwich bread. I have been making this bread for almost 2 years now. It is quick, easy, and if you're dairy-free like me, you're in luck because there's no milk or butter in this recipe at all. If you have a stand mixer, this is my preferred method to make this bread. However, before I found this on Facebook Marketplace, I was making this totally by hand for months. So if you don't have a mixer, don't let that scare you or deter you from this recipe because you can do it by hand as well. That's what I did for a while. So let's just jump straight into it. It's super simple. It's 6 ingredients. The first thing you're gonna need is dry active yeast. I get it in these jars. You can also get like packets of dry active yeast and just do an entire packet right into the mixer. But if you buy it in a jar like me, it's going to be 2 teaspoons. After you add your yeast, you're gonna need to add sugar. I'm just doing like a simple, normal white sugar for this recipe, but I have also done coconut sugar, brown sugar, and honey. So whatever sweetener that you like, just do that one. But for me, I'm just going in with 2 teaspoons of white sugar. Then I'm just gonna give it like a little mix around to make sure it's like evenly distributed, and then it's 1 1/3 cups of warm water. Now, you'll hear a lot of people in baking be like, you want your water to be warm, but not so hot that it like burns a baby, like baby bath water temperature. I've never given a baby a bath, so I don't know what that means. So I just make it warm. Not too hot where you're like gonna burn your finger, not room temperature, like somewhere in between. Don't overthink this part. It's totally fine. Once you get your water in here, you're gonna let it sit for 5 minutes and let this yeast activate. After the first like minute or so, you'll start seeing it like kind of like puff up and bubble up. And that's a good sign. It means your yeast is working and doing its thing. So just let that sit for the full 5 minutes. After 5 minutes, go in with 1 egg. I like to crack it into like a small bowl or a different container rather than directly into my mixer, because if I get a shell in here, it's gonna be impossible to get out. But if I get a shell in this little mini guy, it's so easy to get out, and I'm not great at cracking eggs. So that's just a little tip if you're not good either. Then after the egg is in, 1 teaspoon of salt. And then I just use a fork to mix up that egg, get it all distributed. And now it's time for flour. I'm using all-purpose flour. I think it's probably what most people just have already in their pantry. You can also do bread flour, you can do whole wheat flour. I've done both of those as well, and the loaf is honestly really great. If you do the whole wheat flour, it's gonna be like a smaller, more dense, compact loaf. But today I'm just making like standard white bread, all-purpose flour. And I'm just doing 3.5 cups. And as you can see, serious bakers are gonna be screaming because I'm not weighing this and I'm not really leveling this off perfect. This recipe, again, is just an easy, everyday recipe. I don't want you guys to overthink it. Just go in with 3.5 cups of flour. And then, good. Now, if you're doing this without a mixer, at this point, you'll want to take like a wooden spoon and stir it all up and distribute it. Pour it onto your counter and hand knead it for like, honestly, it's gonna take like probably around 12 minutes, 12 to 15 minutes to get it to be totally done. But if you have a stand mixer, go ahead and attach your dough hook, pull it down, lock it, and then put it on the 2 setting and let it ride for 10 minutes. It's been 10 minutes, so my bread is done. And it's nicely attached to this dough hook. So I'm just pulling this off. Ooh, look how nice and stretchy that is. This looks good. Okay, it's a little sticky. Honestly, this is okay. I even like to do, hope you can see this, I like to do even a little bit of hand kneading at the very end, just so I can like get my hands on the dough and make sure it feels done. I don't know, once you start making bread enough, you'll know what I mean by that. But basically, while I'm kneading it, I can tell it's really soft to the touch. I can tell that it's like tacky, but not like sticking to my hands totally. If it was really sticky to my hands, I would add probably about a teaspoon of flour and keep kneading. If it was really dry and it didn't feel nice and soft like this and didn't feel tacky, I would add about like a teaspoon of a teaspoon of water. If it was dry, I'd add about a teaspoon of water. But this is really really good. Let me show you this loaf. So this is really soft and smooth to the touch. It's like satiny almost. And then I'm just gonna work this like this. If you touch it and how it bounces back really easily, I know it's done kneading. So now this needs to do its first rise. I just grab another bowl because I like a clean slate. You could totally let it rise in whatever bowl you're mixing in, but I'm just gonna drop it in here and I'm gonna grab a towel or like a rag or whatever. You can also use plastic wrap and just cover it to try and keep some of the heat in. And then I like to use my oven on the proof setting as a way to let it rise. So I just hit proof and start. If you don't have a proof setting on your oven, you can preheat it to 350, wait 30 seconds, cut the heat, then put the bread in. If you don't have an oven or can't have access to your oven to let it rise, you can cover it up and put it in your microwave, or you can just flat out set it on your countertop. The warm air is gonna help it rise a little bit quicker. So when I'm letting it rise in my oven on the proof setting, it's about 30 to 35 minutes. I'm looking for it to like not quite double in size, but just under, and I'll show you what that looks like at the end of the rise. But if you do it on your counter, it might take closer to like 45-ish minutes. So just keep that in mind when you're making your bread, that a warmer area is gonna be better for a rise. So I just hit that proof setting, so I'm gonna put it in here and then start my timer for, I'm gonna go 35 minutes. And then I'll show you what it looks like. It's been 35 minutes, so I'm pulling my dough out and you can see that it's much bigger and it's taking up like the whole base of the bowl. So this is done and I'm just going to scrape it, my hands, out of this bowl onto my countertop and give it like a quick 30-second knead. You'll see some people at this step, when it's in the bowl, they'll like punch it down, and that just gets rid of like any air bubbles and redistributes like the yeast and the sugars. I like to just take it out of the bowl and do a quick little hand knead to pop any of those bubbles that are in the dough, just like this. And then I bake my bread in a cast iron loaf pan. I'll link this one below. I like this one a lot, but you can also use like a stainless steel or whatever loaf pan you use. And before I put my dough in for the second rise, I grease the pan with a little bit of plant butter. I can't have dairy, so I use plant butter, but if you're fine with real butter, I definitely recommend just using the real stuff. But I just use a little plastic bag, dunk my hand in there, and then spread it in to the loaf pan. And then to shape your dough, I kind of just like flatten it like this, turn it over, and roll it up. And this gets me a nice kind of like log or tube. And then I put it into the loaf pan and kind of flatten it and spread it out. And then I'm going back over it with the rag, and this is now gonna rise for a second time back in my oven on the proof setting or however you had it rise the first time, and this is gonna go for another 35 minutes. It's been another 35 minutes, so this second proofing is done, and let's check out our loaf. You can see that it is nice and poofed up, and this is like a really good level because the loaf is about 1 inch higher than the loaf pan. So I know this is done and I'm gonna start preheating my oven. I do convection bake. You can also do the regular normal bake. You're still gonna have a great loaf, and if your oven is really good at distributing the heat on its own, it might be totally fine to use just the regular bake. My oven can convert from regular to convection on its own. So I just hit bake under convection, and then it says convert recipe, which means does it want the oven to convert it for me? And I always say yes. And then I type in 350 degrees. And then it also asks me to type in the time, so 30 minutes. And this will start preheating. If your oven doesn't convert it for you, I think the standard rule is to reduce the temperature from the normal baking setting by 25 degrees and then reduce the time by 25%. So if your oven doesn't convert it, you can do 325 degrees on the convection bake, and then instead of the 30 minutes, you reduce that by 25%. So let's see, you'd bake it for about 22 and a half or 23 minutes. Once this comes up to temperature, I'm just gonna pop my loaf in, let it bake for those 30 minutes, and then I will show you how it looks when it comes out of the oven. It's been 30 minutes, my bread is done. I'm just gonna turn off my oven and let's check it out. Okay, whew. This looks great. So you can see it's still a little lopsided, but it's not that bad. It's probably just my oven. It's not super great, but this looks beautiful. And then right out of the oven, I like to put a little bit of butter on top. This just makes sure that as your bread cools, your crust doesn't get super hard and crunchy. So again, I'm using plant butter because I can't have dairy, but if you can, just use regular butter. And I just spread the stick right on top. And then I use my mitts and I pop this out of the bread pan and I put it on a cooling rack. This is gonna sit on this cooling rack for like 4 to 5 hours. You need to make sure your bread properly cools because if you cut in too early while it's still warm, the inside's gonna be like really gummy and gooey and gross. So you need to give it proper time to cool down. You'll know it's cool when it's cool to the touch, but specifically the bottom of the loaf needs to feel like coldish or room temperature. It's been 3.5 hours and my loaf is cooled. It is cool to the touch. There are no warm spots, so I know it's ready to cut into. I just take my bread knife and cut it into slices. This just makes it a lot easier if they're pre-cut. That way, whenever I want a slice, I can go and grab one. And look just how soft. I don't want to totally squish it and ruin it, so I'll just do one piece. Look how like squishy and soft, and this crust isn't too hard. This is super, super good bread. So I'm just gonna go ahead and cut all of these pieces up, and then I store my bread in the freezer, and then every time I want a slice, I just take a piece out and I put it in the toaster oven. You could leave this on your counter, but fresh bread does not last very long. There's no preservatives in this. It's gonna go stale within probably a couple days. You could put it in the refrigerator if you're gonna enjoy it even faster. It probably lasts a few more days there, but we are a household of 2 and we cannot go through bread fast enough for it to not go bad, either set out or in the fridge. So this just goes in the freezer for us. Okay, and I usually save the last piece just to eat fresh. So then I'm gonna take the rest of my loaves, or the rest of my slices, and make sure they're all cut through. And I put them in a stack like this. And then I use these plastic bread bags. I bought a ton of these a long time ago and I can't seem to use them all. Once these are done, I want to get like a cute reusable bread bag, but this is what I have for now. So they all just go in a bag like this. Flip it over, the air out. And then I have a little zip tie that I use. And then I freeze the entire thing just like this. I don't do a pre-freeze with them separated. I don't put parchment paper between. I just do it like this. The slices will kind of stick together just a little bit once they're frozen, but I'm able to separate them really easily with my hands. Or if they aren't coming undone, I'll take a butter knife and put it between whatever piece I want and just lightly tap on the top of my hand, and then the piece just comes right off. So super easy to just break off and put in the toaster oven. So this is it. This is the final loaf. This is my little reward that I will enjoy here in a minute. And that is it for making bread. If you got to the end of this video, thank you so much. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope it gave you everything you need to know to try making sandwich bread yourself for the first time. If you do try it, please let me know. If you like this video, please leave a like, subscribe for more content, leave a comment. Follow me on Instagram at @morethangardening. TikTok, if it still exists by the time you're watching this video, @morethangardening_, and I will see you in the next one.